Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 345. Boxing on a Friday night. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, per usual, Gail from Communities Digital News and NY Fights. Expect Daniel to join us in a few. So, what's going on, Gail?
Hey, we got a big boxing weekend ahead, so a big Friday night edition. We're going to cover it all in record time. You better be listening, everybody. You might miss something.
Absolutely, absolutely. First and foremost, for those who may be checking us out on YouTube Live, I want to give my sincerest apologies. Uh, Technical issues, staff meeting with Three Kings. So, again, my apologies for starting things late. For those who are new to the show, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, podcast, blog slash website discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get talked about. Um, for for those who want to check out all information regarding the show, the blog page is the place to go to. Excuse me, p4pboxingreport.com. Then repeat that, p4pboxingreport.com. If you want to email us with questions and comments, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. On the blog page, you check the top center right hand portion of the page. You will find links to what have checks the show out on social media, on Facebook, um, Twitter, IG, Tumblr, where you can check out the podcast, be it on Anchor, be it on Spotify, be it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and everywhere in between. We're just about all over the podcast realm. Also, where you can donate. Let donation be the best nation. Uh, if you got some coin spare during this upcoming holidays, please shoot some to Pound for Pound Box Report to help the overall production of the show. Behind the scenes, PayPal and Cash Me links there. Let's get things going this evening. Going to be a short show. I condensed it somewhat because uh, folks are tired. Both myself and Gail's been a busy week. And again, I began things late, so I don't want to be too long this evening. Let's start in NYC, Gail. Um, the reason I name this particular, excuse me, I name this particular episode "Time to Humble Yourself." This was in the aftermath of the big fight that took place this weekend. Um, Teofimo Lopez, George Kambosos took place at the Garden, the small Garden, over in New York City, and yeah, Cam Lopez was the favorite, the heavy favorite going in, but hindsight being 2020, you could kind of see this happening as Kambosos came out on fire early, put Lopez on the deck, uh, and he kept it up throughout. He had a bit of a shaky moment in round 10 when he went down, but for the most part, he had control of the fight, outboxed him, in my opinion. The judges scored it correctly his way. And yeah, new unified IBF, WBA, WBO, 135-pound champ. Um, Lopez did not conduct himself well. I'll just say that politely after the fight. Uh, in the ring, saying that he won the fight, he won 10 rounds and whatnot, was heavily scrutinized by pundits and fans afterwards, and just didn't give a good count of himself throughout this entire process. The fight being made, that was a mess. First with Triller, the fight ended up on the zone. How Lopez and Lopez Jr. and Lopez Sr. acted, and even in how Teofimo fought. Um, it was just complete failure on all parts. So, given that, what do you make of the fight itself? What do you make of Lopez both in and out of the ring, and what do you make of Kambosos and what he did to win?
2021 has been the year of the upsets. I'm not sure those are even over. We'll talk about that later in the show. And here comes one more. And here comes one more opponent, not given much of a chance, who told us all exactly what he was going to do with the utmost confidence in himself. And by God, he did exactly what he said. in exactly the way that he said he would, and without so much as an "I told you so." It was just sort of, "Hey, here's how it's going to go down," and it did go down. It just shows you that when we hear fighters in interviews before fight and they say, "Well, I'm not overlooking my opponent," sometimes in a mismatch, we all eye roll. Hey, let's admit it. We hear that and we're like, "Yeah, right. Okay, all right, don't overlook him. Yeah, you're going to crush him like a bug." That is the mindset you've got to have. This is why the fights take place. This is why the fights happen, because the outcomes aren't certain. And maybe the odds are lopsided, but these guys have a say in their fate. Kambosos is the positive example of trained right, laser focus, pushed aside a lot of things going on in his family to make his one shot pay off. He put in the work. Teofimo and his father, who I believe they're both equally culpable. I mean, Junior was the one in the ring executing, but he got no help from Senior. They were the polar opposite. He was very distracted. He was far more interested in the negotiations over this fight, tussling with Bob Arum and Top Rank, which in retrospect was a really bad idea. He wanted to get a payoff for taking this mandatory. A lot of things happened in between. COVID happened, delays happened. His original promoter collapsed, defaulted on their bid. So it's very unusual circumstances, but here's one guy willing to do it on enemy turf who stayed focused, and the other who, for whatever reason, just couldn't. He was unprepared. And then when he realized his mistakes, which had to become obvious to him after the first round when he found himself sitting down on his butt, he was in denial the whole rest of the fight about it. He couldn't admit that something had gone wrong. He seemed to just double right down. His father was just a wreck. And that continued straight through the end of the fight, where he realizes he's lost. It's made official. He's lost. And he's still in denial. He is going through the classic 4 stages of grief. Although he's really lingering in shock and denial, the first stage, he's still there. His ego beat him just as much as George Kambosos did. His ego beat him. You cannot operate like that at the top levels of the sport. He's got a lot of thinking to do. He needs to take some time off. He needs to go back home. He needs to get his personal life straightened out and his relationships straightened out, whether that's with his family, the mother of his child, being a father, dealing with his own father. Teofimo, I think you need to get some professional counseling, and I say that with all due respect. Turn to a professional, get some help, straighten it out, and let's see if you can make that climb back to the top again, because I can't even remember the last fall from grace as big as this. I mean, a lot of people will point to Andy Ruiz Jr., but you know what? In the wake of him losing the rematch to Joshua, he freely admitted how bad he'd fucked it up. I mean, he just said, "Yeah, I didn't train. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I got caught up with the partying and, gosh, I really blew it." He owned it. I still haven't heard one damn thing out of Junior or Senior's mouth to take any responsibility for what happened at all.
Daniel has joined us from the Inscribement and For Boxing News. 2-part question here. First part, Daniel, kind of bouncing off of what Gil was just saying about Teofimo and the many issues that he had heading into this fight. Denial is more than just a river, right? The first part of my question is, given Gail's commentary and her thoughts on Teofimo, can he recover? I know he's young, and in theory, you think that he can overcome this, but ego is a powerful thing that's not always positive or can be used in a positive light. So can he recover? First part. Second part, let's focus on Kambosos here. Um, yes, he was the underdog, but he fought better than many people expected, in spite of the fact that Teofimo was probably overlooking him. What say you about him moving forward? We're going to talk about Devin Haney and his fight with Jojo Diaz later on. He's there in Las Vegas. Um, he's looking for a unification bout, undisputed honors versus the winner. So yeah, first part about Teofimo and Kenny recovers. Second part, uh, what kind of champion do you think that Kambosos can be?
First, the first question is the most pertinent. Now, Gail mentioned a little bit of surrounding the issue. Obviously, like I said, the three of us are privy to some information that uh, it very delves deep. We're not gonna delve into it out of, like I said, out of courtesy and honor. But there's a lot happening, unfortunately, with Tio. A lot happening, and it's not going to be a quick fix. It may take a whole complete and utter cleaning house of the shop. If that means leaving his father, he has to leave his father. Get a new trainer. Talk to people. You're still under Top Rank. Top Rank has not done the release bit, even though right now they probably have every right to. But get focused. You're gonna have to get your head cleared for a long time because obviously the when I think I mentioned it on Twitter, like when watching him saying that he won when it was clearly that he lost. And I think he was just hoping that that 10th round would have been enough for Kambosos to just surrender afterwards, but Kambosos didn't. Obviously. Now, I mentioned on Twitter that he was slowly becoming the next Adrian Broner, in the sense that we saw as soon as Broner lost to Maidana, how badly it fell apart for him, and how much of his own situation, the issues he hasn't dealt with. Teal's unfortunately in the danger of showing up in the same thing. He has to really look inward, fix everything what is going on, and then maybe come back a little bit stronger. Maybe you're not going to come back a lightweight. Maybe you're going to come back at 140. But at least come back in your head clear. You can't just come back for the sake of the money and then just watch your career fall down again, again, again. Like I mentioned, Adrian Broner is the prime example of this. Now, as far as Kambosos being the champion, he proved that he has the patience to box, he has patience to put in combinations, and that he's a tough dude. The problem is going to be though is that most of the rest of the field at lightweight isn't going to have the same problems that Tio had as far as like ego and as far as not taking him seriously. Like Tank will probably take him seriously, and Tank knows what the opportunity is, and Floyd definitely sees it. It'll probably have to be in the U.S. if they go that route. Devin Haney knows what's at stake for him. He is the WBC champion. He's the one belt that technically is out there because Kambosos can't claim undisputed, and he's patient enough to do it. Whether his team will do it is another thing. His challenger Jojo Diaz, experience. He knows how close he's been to winning the title, and he also knows how to be the underdog and winning the title. he has the experience on both ends. Kambosos could be a good champion. Just depends who they line up first for him, and whether it's Tank, whether it's Haney, whether it's Jojo Diaz, whether it's somebody else, whether it could be Loma or even Ryan Garcia. You don't know what's going to happen, but let's give him at least a chance. He's earned that after last Saturday.
First of all, shout out to Mitch in the chat. I'm 10 to 2 on my dream hours too. Thanks for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe. In terms of Teofimo, I agree with you. He has to do some cleaning house. He do has to look in the mirror first as well, and kind of have a come to Jesus meeting with himself, uh, a serious discussion with himself, because things. Let's be polite about it and say things are not kosher, not only with him but the folks who are around him. And look, Kambosos said during the fight, he called it. He said he's changed. He says that he said that the people that used to be with him are no longer there, and he's changed for the worse. In terms of Kambosos, I like the fact that he's there in Vegas with Haney, him and Devin, WBC lightweight champion, had a little face to face talk yesterday, right? Said he wants to fight Haney unification. The thing with me is, I don't think that fight will happen next, right? Um, People may disagree with me here, but I wouldn't be upset if he was to make a voluntary defense at home in Australia. He did enough to earn it in the way that he won. He said all along that he was going to win, and he did it. Yeah, let him collect some coin in the bank. A big fight in the home crowd, at home, and what will be a big crowd. So I wouldn't be upset if he got that out the way. Then go for a Haney or a Tank Davis. As long as that those kind of fights eventually happen, so what? Let him get a defense, a voluntary defense here or there. So I wouldn't be mad at that. But yeah, Teofimo, yeah, lot of ish, lot of ish going on, and I think in Kambosos, not only his fighting ability, but I think he has the personality that's quite refreshing. He comes off as a very honest dude. We've all been in uh, um, we were in Zoom chats with him throughout this entire process while this bout was being postponed and postponed over and over. He seems to be an earnest guy. I have nothing against him. Let's move on to one more fight. We're not going to cover that many fights here. Again, we're going to try to make this episode as short as possible. Next fight. On the undercard, I didn't see this fight on the Lopez Kambosos undercard. A fight for the vacant um, IBF belt at 130 pounds. Ogawa, who, for those who don't remember, lost to Tevin Farmer, fought Tevin Farmer, but he was disqualified because of PED uses, right? Well, he fought for the vacant title for a South African by the name of Fuzile. Put Fuzile, from everything I've read, and I'll go to you, Daniel. If you saw the fight, from everything I've read, Ogawa looked terrific in this bout. All the hoopla over Lopez Kambosos, Ogawa's performance was overlooked. Put him down, boxed him throughout, and from comments that I was reading on boxing Twitter, um, he made not only did he win the title, but he looked like he could be a champion for a while. If you were able to witness this contest, Daniel, um, were the positive feedback that I was reading, was that valid?
I unfortunately did miss it, but I have heard similar things.
Were you able to witness the fight, Gail? If so, your opinion.
I did see the fight, and it was really tough for all the guys on the undercard to have gotten a whole lot of attention because clearly the main event just took all the air out of the room. But um, the fight was fairly even through the first 3 or 4 rounds until that fifth round, when Ogawa landed a right hook, and it was set up by an absolutely perfect left jab feint. He threw it out there just a few inches short of the nose. Fuzile bit, and bang, the right hook came in right behind it. And he was smart enough to take a knee versus, let fate take him down to the ground. And that prevented him from taking any more shots. So it let him survive the round. But man, the writing was already on the wall at that point. Ogawa kept battering him. He outworked him. He was wearing him down, and he didn't have a lot to offer after he got hit so hard. And then Fuzile suffered headbutt cuts to both sides of the face. That was really unfortunate. That sort of made the end quicker, more messy. It would have come anyway. But it was a title fight, so he wasn't going to walk off voluntarily. Credit him for toughness. He was pretty bloodied. He'd been beaten up. In final round, he got knocked down twice more. Yeah, it was near the end of the fight. You really thought he would be waved out at that point. But the referee let him finish. Let him finish. I really think the corner of Fuzile should have stopped the fight several rounds prior. I mean, Fuzile was just taking damage. So that was a bit of a black mark, if you ask me. But Ogawa looked great. And it's a little bit of redemption for him. 4 years ago, after he beat Kevin Farmer, it was declared a no contest because he popped positive, and I think it was androstenediol, if I remember. So he was very emotional about this win, and he mentioned, after the former fight where I lost the belt. Yeah, we all know what the former fight was. You lost the belt because you blew it on a drug test. But he was very emotional about wanting to take the belt back home for his kids, and he said he was looking for the knockout. His trainer was asking for the knockout, but credit to Fuzile, he was just too tough to let that happen. But a really good outcome for Ogawa. Does it completely erase the black mark on his record? Well, 4 years ago was a long time in boxing. People have pretty short memories about that stuff. Hopefully he is a clean athlete, that he learned his lesson and he moves forward. But he looked great last Saturday.
And it is my understanding from readings from some pretty credible sites that cover Asian boxing in Asia, I should say. It looks like Ogawa will return to the ring this spring, and then he'll fight again in the summer, or in the summer. And from what my reading, it will be over in England. I also want to give a shout out to previous regular pound for pound box report, Gus, aka Corruption in Boxing. He sends his hello, Gail and Daniel. You can check out Gus, aka Corruption in Boxing, on the Coup d'etat podcast, which is, if you want to hear deep boxing nerdum, uh, geekery, if you will, really breaking down fights and fighters almost frame by frame, slow motion, really in-depth insight. Just check out the Coup d'etat podcast that you can find weekly, I believe, here on YouTube. So yeah, gotta have you back on here, Gus. I gotta get you out of the bat cave so you can come out of retirement. One more fight, but we can go to before we move on to the news. I'm pretty sure you saw this fight, Daniel. Um, Unification bout at 122 pounds took place on Showtime between Stephen Fulton, WBO champion, junior featherweight, and Brandon Figueroa, WBC champion, I covered this fight for Three Kings Boxing. Please check out Three King Boxing, threekingboxing.com. Your source for pure, unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to the crew over there. Head of Three Kings 2K, head of media relations Bo, who you heard last week on the show. Uh, um, Lead writer Bakari, fellow senior writer Jarrell, aka Big Cool, editor Red. Yeah, I covered this fight specifically for Three King Boxing. One of the best fights of the year, in my opinion, Daniel. Uh, Back and forth. Look, Figueroa, we know what he does. He likes to come forward. He likes to put on the pressure. And after getting off to a little bit of a slow start, in my opinion, he cranked it up and did just that. Made Fulton fight throughout. I thought Fulton could have done a better job of boxing, but I think he wanted to prove something. Um, and so he stood there and fought through large segments of the fight. He ended up getting a win by, I want to say, either split or majority decision. I can't remember right now. It escapes me, but
It's majority
majority
decision.
decision. You're right. That's right. And Figueroa, he protested bitterly. Uh, and if we're going to be honest about it, his protest, it was very similar to the way Teofimo protested. So if you want to give him some criticism for that, by all means, I can't push back against it. But within that, he was kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth. Daniel Fulton said, "Okay, if you got beef, let's do it again." Figueroa was like, "Yeah, we can." But then when pressed further by Jim Gray from Showtime, he was like, "Yeah, this is my last fight at 122 pounds. I'm moving up to 126." Well, excuse me, sir. What do you want? Do you want the rematch with Fulton at 22, or do you want to move up to 26? What is it? So your thoughts on the fight itself, Daniel, and kind of the wishy-washy talking with forked tongue from Figueroa in the post fight.
The fight was very, very good in the sense of the fact that you saw Fulton trying to extend the range, extend at least the leverage that he had when it comes to the landing combinations against Figueroa. Because unfortunately, one of the things that Figueroa do well, and this is unfortunately a family trait because Omar did it too, he does stick his chin out a bit. However, to me, I don't think Fulton really, really prepared for the fact that Brandon just kept coming. I think he figured that he would discourage him after a few rounds and then just started boxing pretty well and with the occasional skirmish. But no, Brandon just kept coming. That kid has stamina for days and has a pretty good chin too because he took some good uppercuts from Fulton when he was in those exchanges. And unfortunately, to me, this fight was a draw. I have no problem going either way, but and it was a majority decision. One judge had it a draw, the other two judges had a 116, 112 for Fulton. It's unfortunately also the case of body punching not really getting the credit that it's needed. And that's the thing with Brandon. He is a body puncher. That was his bread and butter in that fight. Fulton landed more to the head. He did some body work too, but it did more to the head, and that helped them out when they came to scoring and they came to those judges. Now, as far as what happened afterwards, because like I said, it's a draw to me. Everything worked out pretty fine as far as how the fight ended up. I'm fine either way, Fulton or Brandon winning. At least Brandon had more of a case than Teo in this case. Like you can make a case for Brandon winning that fight, but it is a little bit bitter the way he said it. I understand somewhat of what he's saying is because he probably feels that the politics won't get involved into it, but it does sound bitter in that sense. Because he wants to fight, but then he says going to 126. I think he kind of feels that the cards are stacked against him either way, but that's not an attitude to have when you just had a latecomer, a dark horse latecomer for fight of the year. So he's probably going to take some time to do it. He did himself no disservice in that fight when it came to Brandon. Just mainly work a little bit on the attitude. See what you can actually do. See if you can actually make the weight at 122. If you can physically make it, then keep going forward. Like do the rematch at 122. If not, then then move up. Featherweight, it's a pretty open field right now. So there are chances for championships for him in that sense. But it was a good fight. The post game did kind of leave a little bit taste of a mouth, but at least Brandon had a much better case than Teal did.
I'll go to you, Gail, but I'm gonna roll out a couple of comments here from Mayflower Royal Family in the live YouTube chat. He said his opinion: Fulton Figueroa dominated. He was in the arena. He says there's no point in a rematch. He'll get robbed. Figueroa hurt Fulton every other round. I disagree with that strongly. Fulton doesn't punch hard. Doesn't need to. As long as he's effective, that's the point. If Figueroa won big, I disagree with that. I had Figueroa winning by 2 points on my card, but if folks want to go the 2 points the other way around, sure, I have no problem with that. Or folks who say it's a draw, I have no problem with that. No rematch, leave PBC. These guys, what's the point? Why would he want to? No. Sorry for going on this, Gail, but if you want to comment on it as well, why leave PBC for what? He got this fight because he was fighting for them. He got the opportunity to fight Neri. In part because of them. That they helped him get in his position anyway. Just because you disagree with the decision, it doesn't mean he has to just all of a sudden bounce. Where is he gonna go? Top rank? Okay. What do they have going on major at 22? If you want to say the zone, okay, I get you there, but no, there's no reason for him to necessarily leave PBC. He was doing good while he was there. I'll go to you, Gail. Like I said, respect royal family for your comments. I just think that the fight was close. I agree with Daniel there, even though he had it a draw. I had Figueroa winning 7-5 rounds. Your thoughts on the fight, Gail?
I'm with you completely, Michael, on this one. And my scorecard was the same. But if you look at the rounds that are close, could swing either way, there were too many to count. A lot of judgment, and it's called judgment for a reason, is your perception of what it takes to win and what skills you believe are more important. Yes, there are specific guidelines. But beyond that, you look at two fighters with two different approaches, and you do look at the statistics to help guide your perception when you're there. And then you have to make a decision. What is more valuable? Is it power punches in volume? Or is it greater accuracy in landing your punches? In other words, fighting smarter, not harder, right? Because if we simply rewarded straight out aggression, you just see guys brawling like crazy and flying fists, and that's not skill. That is not to say that I'm calling Figueroa unskilled in any way, but his approach is very aggressive. He is more volume-minded. He's busier. Somebody like Fulton, he's a little more of a slick technician. He knows he's not a power puncher, but he wants to make every punch he lands count. Accuracy can go a long way. In fact, I believe it was in an interview with George Kambosos, who's also not known as a power puncher, who noted that he had been studying punching and the science behind punching. and that you only need 3.5 pounds pressure to the right punch to the head to drop somebody. Well, shit, I can do that. And I'm a flyweight, okay? But that demands incredible technique and accuracy. And it's almost impossible to do that, especially with the guy trying not to be hit. So you see two sets of skills. You know, a draw would have been fine, but in this case, there's a victor on the scorecards and a person who is not a victor, aka a loser, but nobody lost. Everyone loved the fight. Both fighters raised their profile. Even Figueroa in the loss raised his profile. He's still of enormous value. You know, in boxing, we know this intellectually, but we're still clinging to this idea of, oh my God, if you have a loss, you're not worth anything anymore. That is what is driving guys away from making tough fights and what is driving fans toward UFC. We have to knock off that way of thinking. What we need to say is, damn, wasn't that a good fight? Man, those guys both brought it. It was really close. Now did the scorecards completely reflect how close it was? I think it was a tough fight to score. I'll give them a pass on that. Do they want to do it again? If Figueroa is having trouble making weight and he wants to move up and find a new challenge and feel that his power is going to carry and he'll be a better performer at 126, then that's what he needs to do. This fight did not erase his surprising victory over Luis Neri, which was really impressive. He's still got a tremendous future. These guys are young. One loss does not destroy somebody's career, and we all need to take that a whole lot less seriously as fans. We really do.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, it was a outstanding fight. Both did good account for themselves. They did themselves justice. I was certainly cheering at the end of the fight. The fans were, well, not cheering in a literal sense, but as I was writing, I was like, okay, this is damn good, right? Um, if Fulton says, let's run it back, Figueroa, call his bluff. And if that means you got to go down to 122 one more time, so be it. You made it this fight. Just come back as soon as possible. Keep your weight down over the holidays, and let's have these two dance again in the spring. Who would have a problem with that? Pundit, fan, hardcore, casual, uh, uh, anywhere in between. Um, nobody would have a problem with that. Respectfully, Mayflower, you're not being objective here. Fig destroyed Fulton. Fig is hard. No, 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 no. One, he didn't destroy Fulton. Two, Figueroa is not quote and quote horrible. They're both good fighters. They just had a really good fight. If you felt that Figueroa won, just leave it at that. We ain't got to go into the hyperbole about how he destroyed this guy and this fighter's a bum and that fighter's a bum. No, just say you felt he won and keep it moving. But I think I will speak for Gail and Daniel and for a lot of folks who watched the fight or who watched the fight. Let them do it again. No problem. No problem. No problem. Um, and no, Fig doesn't suck big time. Let's have some more positivity here, sir. Come on, be objective. Let's move on to some news here. Um, I'm going to add something else to the docket, if you don't mind, Gail and Daniel. But first, let's talk about kind of developments that's kind of came forth out of Japan over the last 24 hours. I'll start the conversation off with you, Gail. Japan, as we all know, uh, has a series of big events featuring their local champions to close out the year. In 2021, that was going to be what's considered a super fight over there between Gennady Golovkin. He was going to travel over to Japan and fight Ryota Murata on the 29th of December. On the 31st, we're going to have a unification bout at 115 pounds between Kazuto Ioka and Gervonta Ioka, the WBO champion at 115, right, fighting IBF junior bantamweight champion Gervonta Cajas, right? Well, news broke earlier today that those fights have been postponed due to concerns over the spreading um, Omicron Cron variant of COVID-19. Um, and Japan having a subsequent travel ban as a result of those concerns, right? Well, last year, Japan basically had a shutdown. In recent months, Gail and Daniel, they've postponed a series of boxing events. Um, for the longest, they didn't even have fans in attendance for their events. Um, no word on the Inoue bout he's supposed to fight also in December. I hadn't heard any word about that as the time of this recording, as of the time of this live show. But yeah, this new variant, Omicron of COVID-19, um, having an immediate impact on the sport. Your reaction?
It's a shame. It's understandable. And in retrospect, 2 or 3 weeks from now, it might look like overkill. It might. But better to make a mistake in that direction than let things roll along and suddenly, we've got another blazing viral brush fire out of control in a country where people live very close together, in tight quarters. It's a sporting event. We're very disappointed. I'm extremely disappointed. Both these guys have been out of the ring since long before the pandemic started. It's just a mess for both of them. But best case scenario, the postponement takes place. Omicron turns out to be not exactly as fearful as we think. In fact, we really don't know what we don't know about it. There's some indications that it may spread more quickly but not be as dangerous, which would honestly be a good thing. But we've got to wait and find out. So let's hope they've canceled the fight. Omicron fears turned out to be unfounded. It's no more dangerous than anything we got out there right now. They get this fight right back on the books at the beginning of the year, and all we've lost is a couple of weeks. Hopefully these guys do not go back home and gorge themselves on all that Christmas food and goodies. Do not send those guys Christmas cookies. That's all I'm saying.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Japan is has been much more stringent um, on this than most countries, including in the United States. Your your thoughts on them making this move?
I expected it pretty much. If it was, and your kindest fight, I expected it to. Even despite the fighters already been in Japan. Japan has been one of those countries that you mentioned that it's been quick to shut down and go into lockdown as soon as something new major comes up. Although they're a little bit of a paradox because they've also seen some of their cases rises in recent months, but that's due to another issue. The main situation that you're gonna focus in this case, and with this Omicron variant, shout out Transformers on that name, is that we have to see what is going on because Gail is right when she mentioned that all that we know so far is that this virus, this version of the virus, this variant, is easier to transmit than Delta, but it may not be as deadly as Delta. So that's a good thing. That it may not be as deadly as Delta, but we don't know that yet. 2 days ago, we thought the variant came from South Africa. It turns out that no, it was in Europe before South Africa reported
Right.
it, which would actually also explain the massive spikes that Europe has also been experiencing with COVID. So we have to see where it goes. It's good to err on the side of caution. Hopefully, we'll have this fight in these fights in the beginning of 2022, maybe spring, because unfortunately, especially when it comes to Golovkin, the longer this goes on, the more he's going to age. The less time he's going to have to try to make these type of fights. And if he is looking to either fight an Andrade, fight a Charlo, or fight, or even attempt another Canelo fight after this, all this does is just take away time from him doing so.
Indeed, indeed. I think this will be rescheduled. Let me say, fingers crossed, it will be rescheduled. My guess is that it will eventually. Hope in January, February of 2022. Let's hope so. It's a real shame. I was looking forward to both of those fights, particularly the Ioka and Kaha's fight. Very, very competitive matchup. At 115 pounds, Ioka. Really becoming one of my favorite fighters. I like him now more at this stage of his career than I did, let's just say, 10 years ago. Check out Three Kings Boxing. We have him among the top 10 pound for pound fighters in the top 10 fighters in the sport overall. Golovkin, Murata, it was intriguing. It was going to be a huge event over in Japan. It was going to draw a lot of money, big crowd. International audience from around the globe. Let's hope everything gets rescheduled. The new topic I'm going to bring in, and we're going to talk about this right quick, is that concerning Anthony Joshua. I don't know how I feel about this, but whoever wants to chime in, please do. Reports are now surfacing that let me correct myself. It was previously thought that Joshua would fight a rematch with Usyk ASAP, spring 2022. It was also thought that Tyson Fury, the WBC heavyweight champion, his first title defense would be against WBC heavyweight mandatory contender Dylan White. Well, there are reports surfacing that Joshua is contemplating taking step aside money in order for a Fury Usyk fight for undisputed honors, so long as he gets the winner. How do you feel about this move? Should it happen? How do you feel about Joshua's uh, decision here? Is he wrong? Should he go for the fight with Usyk first instead of trying to wait to fight for all the belts? Does this for me? Does this say that as much as he talked about wanting a rematch with Usyk, maybe he doesn't want it? Maybe he's hoping that Fury beats an Usyk because he thinks he has a better chance to beat Fury?
I don't think that's it. This troubles me a lot. I'm interested in the strategic thinking behind it, and I do see the point for Joshua saying, "Listen, I'll take the step aside money," and you're right, hoping that Fury beats Usyk so that he gets the Fury fight. But that's a tougher fight for him, and he may not care. He's liable to, in my opinion, he's liable to lose to Usyk anyway. He's probably also liable to lose to Fury. What's the bigger money fight? What's the bigger, I want to cash out my career and get out of boxing fight? It's against Fury, not Usyk. That's where I see this thinking going. A lot of guys would do anything to avenge a loss. anything. Get me back in there. I want to prove it was a fluke. I've got it figured out, or I didn't have a good training camp, or I didn't work hard enough, or I had COVID, or, we've all heard the excuses or the reasons why people lose, but they're very anxious to get back in there and right the wrongs, in their opinion. Joshua has no such urgency. So he's clearly going for the money fight. Why? I don't like a lot of the reasons behind potential whys. I don't see his enthusiasm for this. He's made a boatload of money, more money than he could probably spend unless he gambles like Floyd Mayweather does. And he just may not have the appetite for it. He is such a well-known celebrity in Great Britain. There's a lot of potential for him to do things that will help income keep coming in without having to get pummeled and punched in the face. And he may be looking at that life down the road already. So he may already have one foot off the canvas and out of the door. That's what this says to me.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was responding to a comment from Mitch in the chat, and I put it up here for everybody. He says, "Take the money." I just want some clarification. Are you saying, Mitch, that AJ should take the step aside money? Uh, if so, I'm kind of in line with Gail here. I mean, he could take it, but the dude is a marketing machine. He makes money just stepping outside. Uh, Given his endorsements and whatnot, he doesn't have to really do anything to make a buck. He's one of the wealthiest athletes in the world. Um, I'll kind of pose the question. I'll the question I asked of Gail. I'm going to ask the same question towards you in a different way, in a different context. The fact that Joshua is even contemplating this. Uh, Psychological game here, Daniel. What does it say about his mental mindset?
It can say a lot of things. And it can say, one, that he may think the way a lot of people think that, and that Usyk probably has the best chance to beat Fury on a technical level than the rest of the heavyweight field. And this could also be a scenario where he maybe wants to avoid a home country loss, a
Your
humiliating
mic
one.
is a little bit low, Daniel. So could you speak up a little bit, please?
It's a little bit better now. How is it now?
It's fair. I think. Can you hear him, Gail?
I'm hearing him just fine.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, like I mentioned, he may just not want a home country loss because that's the biggest fight that UK can make right now is Joshua Fury, and given his recent losses, more and more people are lining up to say that Fury will beat him. And you talked about brand. I don't think his brand can take that loss in that manner. So maybe he's thinking Usyk takes it out, so then maybe I can do certain things in the fight, and maybe I can win against Usyk without, and then be undisputed without having to fight Fury. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is you don't know if you can beat either one. You don't know what you need to do. You're still technically searching out for trainers, even though you're on one end you're trying to say that you're still keeping McCracken, and on the other end you're holding auditions for new trainers. So it could be a scenario where he feels that an immediate rematch would be him being unprepared, him probably losing to Usyk again, which has almost the same effect as it would if he lost to Fury, damages his brand. And why not take the money, resolve this issue, and whoever wins that fight, you were gaining the weight, and if you lose, that's fine. Like, luckily, Josh was young enough; he has his wits about him, and he's a good-looking guy. He can market himself pretty well outside of the boxing ring, right afterwards, if he chooses to retire after losing a fight against Fury or Usyk, because the other option is going to do what Deontay Wilder is going to have to do if he wants to get himself back into the picture, which is him going through the slog of making yourself a contender again. And I don't think it's mainly out of fear. It's just that one of the things, unfortunately, that affected Joshua in the loss of Ruiz is it took away a lot of his confidence as far as him thinking that he could beat anyone. So he's become overly cautious in some areas. And the loss to Usyk looks to be just exacerbating that further.
I'll go to Mitch. He made the clarification here. He was saying, I asked him, let me go back. I asked him, are you saying AJ should take the step aside money? He says yes. Uh, he says yes, take the money. He went on to say that I would not say AJ is afraid of anyone, but if he can get a couple million and take a 6 month break and still sell out Wembley, um, why not? I can also say in response as a retort that he could make that anyway. He's going to make that couple of million anyway. Uh, I First world rich people problem here. I'm not saying I'm not rich, but I'm thinking, but I'm kind of using that any. I'm using that anyway, using that phrasing anyway. Rich world problems. When you make the amount of money this dude makes, not just in the ring and from endorsements, taking a couple million step aside fee. One, if he's going to get a step aside fee, it's going to be more than a couple of million. But anyway, he's going to take that. Okay, he could take that same break and get this new trainer that he's been searching for and put in extra time in the gym. He's talking about for the rematch for another fight, a second fight with Usyk. He's basically going to be a pit bull. Well, take that extra time and work on that. Take that extra time and use it as a period of orientation with the new voice in your camp and the new strategy that comes with it. Uh, it doesn't if he's and it doesn't matter what he takes the step aside fee or not. I don't care that he's not champion. He still has the pull, the cachet to get the fight anyway. There's a rematch clause. It's going to happen anyway. So step aside. It doesn't. What does it really mean if he's going to if he can ultimately swing the fight? So I don't see the point, and that's why I am in agreement with Gail here. It's a bit head scratching. It's a bit head scratching, in my opinion. But I do appreciate your comments, and I do appreciate your comments, and I like the fact that you push back and challenging us here. Let's move on, and like I said, this is going to be a short show, so we're going to not have that many fights to talk about. Let's move on to some previews. I'm going to go one per one here. Daniel and Gail. Not, and what I mean by that is one person talk about one fight, another person talk about another fight. Uh, um, Going to go to you on this one, Gail, for this first fight. Jessica McCaskil. I think this is her first fight since the rematch win against Cecilia Brækhus. She's undisputed women's welterweight champion. She was set to fight Burgos, but now she's fighting Kandi Wyatt. I believe Wyatt lost to uh, Ibarra. No, either Ibarra. I forgot who she lost to, but she lost her last fight. Um, your thoughts on this? I mentioned Ibarra. I'm going to throw her in here force her in here in the discussion anyway. I was hoping that the fight with Ibarra would be her first defense since Ibarra is her mandatory contender. Um, I think she will beat Wyatt, and here's hoping, should she beat Wyatt, that Ibarra is next, because that's one of the fights I want to see in women's boxing.
Yeah, once again, we've just had a lot of mixing and matching, opponents, and you know, it's a disappointment that Alma Ibarra isn't going to be available. I saw her over the summer here in San Diego. She fought, on a local card, won very handily on the cards, against Wyatt. So I've also seen Wyatt. The cards were fairly wide, but Wyatt gave a very good accounting of herself. She certainly didn't have anything to be ashamed of. And hey, she is saving the fight. So I give enormous credit to her. She is a fighter out of Canada. She's based in sort of Midwestern Canada, Calgary, Alberta. So, sort of the Canadian equivalent of Omaha, if you will. She does have a couple of 3 knockouts on her record, so she's got some power. She's no match for McCaskil. McCaskil is absolutely the cream of the crop in the division, but it gives McCaskil the chance to get in another fight before the end of the year, which is super important. Keep her active. We talk so much about fighters, not getting enough fights, getting rusty. This may end up a bit of a sparring session. I'm still okay with that. And it's good for McCaskil to continue to be in front of fans. DAZN has been very smart in adding her to their commentary teams for all their fights. I wish they use her a little more. I think the commentary booth has gotten a little crowded, but she's extremely good at it. So she's getting some attention outside the ring for her boxing knowledge, and we'll be able to get to see her perform. So it's a good appearance, but we all know what's going to happen. Again, you're the upset, but I really don't expect it here.
Point of correction here. Yeah, Kandi Wyatt, she did lose to Ibarra last time out. She's on a 2-fight losing streak. Actually, she lost to Ibarra in August. She also lost to Callie Reese, and
Yeah, but and that and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that brings up, she is willing to fight top talent, and she does not get completely blown out. She's in the fight to the end. So props to her for that.
And also, let me just say that respectfully, I don't think that McCaskil is the clear-cut class of the division. I keep mentioning Ibarra, and the reason is that I think Alma Ibarra is going to, when she eventually gets her shot, and she owed her shot, she earned it. When she eventually fights McCaskil, I think she's going to give McCaskil pure D hell in the ring when they fight. As a matter of fact, I'm saying it right here and now. Do not be surprised one bit if Ibarra beats her. I think she's that good. I think she's that hungry. Rick Ramos has ran his mouth off too much uh, uh, um, about her. She mentioned him after she beat Wyatt. She says, "Yeah, I want that fight, and I'm here. And my motivation, Ramos, is to shut you up. And when you face a fighter who's her personal story is something. It is really, really something. I wrote about it for Three Kings Boxing, in and around that fight, and she's motivated, she's hungry, and she's talented. And you're hearing it. You're hearing it from me right now. When that fight happens, hopefully first half of 2022, do not be one bit surprised if Alma Ibarra beats Jessica McCaskil. You heard it here first. Um, More fights to talk about. I'll go to you on this one, uh, um, Daniel. Um, McCaskil and Wyatt, I believe, is going to be on the undercard. of Devin Haney and JoJo Diaz. We talked extensively. We mentioned Haney in terms of our discussion about Kambosos and his win over JoJo Diaz. Haney, let's just face it, him and JoJo, they got beef. This fight came about as much through Twitter trash talk more than anything else. Um, Haney was looking for a fight. Diaz was looking for a fight. They begin to talk a whole lot of ish towards each other. And guess what? It happens. Um, your thoughts, your predictions, your keys in terms of this fight.
Now this is going to be fun because this is pretty much kind of a redemption story for Diaz because in many ways he's seen this type of fighter before, the type of like can throw combinations, can 9 times out of 10 could probably outbox somebody in their sleep. He saw it in featherweight in Gary Russell Jr. And in that fight, if he just would have stepped on the gas a little bit sooner, he likely would have beaten Gary Russell Jr. And that's the experience he has to carry into it. He's in the weight division. Yeah, you don't have like fight changing power, but you have the experience that you can go through a fight, evaluate it, and then win. You have that experience in beating Tevin Farmer for the IBF 130-pound title. And with Haney, we don't know really how much that 11th and 12th round against Jorge Linares could still be in his head. It's been a long time, but we haven't seen him be that vulnerable in a fight. And the 11th round, where you could tell Linares hurt him, and in the 12th round, he did everything possible to make sure Linares didn't hurt him again. Taking that out of the conversation, Haney should have a good chance of beating JoJo when it comes into range, when it comes into ring generalship. But we've seen what can happen before. We've seen it last week. You never count out the underdog in this type of fight. And in this situation, I may be going for the upset. I think JoJo wins it. But it'll probably be a very, very, very close fight. I would not be surprised if it's a decision where you can say that Haney won or if it's a draw. I think it'll be very close. I think Haney's going to get tested in attrition against Diaz. But I can also see Haney using his skill set, using his ring generalship to keep Diaz at bay and possibly winning. But I would not be surprised. I said, I'm picking the upset here.
I gotta go back to you on this one, Gail. Quick prediction.
Same. I don't think Diaz Jr. is as much of a underdog as the odds makers are leading folks to believe. I was ringside for his fight with Fortuna. That was a fight he took on short notice, filling in for Ryan Garcia, of all people. His first fight at lightweight, he looked good. He looked great. Fortuna gave him a lot to handle, and he handled it. And a win like that, is a lot more than just another win on BoxRec. It's a confidence builder. And guess who was really confident last week? George Kambosos. That stuff tends to be catching. And both Diaz Jr. and Haney now perceive their path to being undisputed as being easier, which is kind of insane considering Kambosos beat Lopez, and now they think Kambosos is the easier guy to face. But they become the man. Whoever wins that fight becomes his mandatory. As you mentioned with Kambosos, I would have no heartburn at all with him having a nice victory fight in Australia. He has not fought in front of his hometown fans, I think, in 6 years. It's crazy. He deserves that fight, and it would be incredibly smart and build anticipation for a showdown between Kambosos and whoever wins tomorrow night. To have that winner ringside, nice little trip to Australia here in a few months. It'll still be summertime. They can enjoy the trip. Hopefully, COVID is not going to get in the way of that. And it's super smart marketing and build up to make whoever wins a favorite of the fans over there, or at least more familiar to them. Uh, I think Diaz is hungrier. Diaz's resume is far better than Haney's. He needs to make it very ugly. Um, and the other asset in his favor that I haven't seen mentioned a lot is that Haney has not faced a whole lot of southpaws. And that was an interesting issue against Fortuna. There was a lot of messing around with the footing and the direction that Diaz was coming at him. It really worked in his favor. Haney doesn't like to get hit. The idea of boxing really is hit and not get hit. But we all know guys who kind of relish getting in there and mixing it up and eating a little leather. Haney is not one of them, and if Diaz Jr. can land some solid shots on him early, and I think it will demoralize him. And you're right, Daniel. I think he'll have, the muscle memory of what Linares did still in his head, and that is something Diaz Jr. can exploit. I do think he'll win. I don't think he'll stop him, but I do think he'll win a unanimous decision, and maybe there'll be an attrition type knockdown in the mix. We'll see.
I think Diaz can win. First of all, let me give a shout out to Orlando Cortez. She says, gives everyone her hellos. I think that Jojo Diaz can win. I just don't think he will. I just do not. I think he will come up just a bit short. Excuse me. The success that he found against Fortuna in his last bout, I just don't think he'll be able to find against Haney. A little bit better movement. I think the naturally bigger and stronger guy. I think the better jab, right? If Haney can find a way to keep things on the outside, learn why he got caught and why he got stunned against why he got caught and why he got stunned against Linares. I think he will improve from that Linares fight, and be a better fighter against Diaz. He knows that Diaz is dangerous, and I think he saw what Teofimo Lopez, the mistakes he made in terms of attitude. He will not have that same problem in this fight, and I just think he'll find a way to win. Before we move on to other fights, Daniel, Gail had to dip out. If you want to talk boxing with her, you can check out her work on Communities Digital News. That's com, COMM, DIGI news.com, COMM, news.com. You can also check out her writings on nyfights.com, or you can check her out on Twitter at PRPro San Diego. I want to thank her thank her for being on the show. Excuse me. Let's move on to a couple other fights here, Daniel, that you can break down. Over in England, rematch between London Arthur and Anthony Yarde. The two fought almost a year ago they're going to fight on the 4th. They fought almost a year ago to that day last year. They fought on December 5th of last year. And Arthur surprised many by beating Yarde by decision, right? Split decision. The key in that fight, Daniel, was the jab of Arthur. Anthony Yarde had no answers for it all fight long. He kept getting pecked and prodded and picked with that stick, and he had no answers. His trainer Tunde had no counters for that in the corner as well. Yarde has only fought one fight since, an easy 1-round KO. the question for me, it's a simple question, Daniel. Can he handle the jab? If he can deal with the jab and have a counter for Arthur's jab, he has a shot. If he doesn't, this rematch is going to be this just basically part two of their first fight.
Exactly. That's the main thing. We have to remember the jab is also what bothered him a little bit against Kovalev in that fight in
Yeah.
Russia. So it's an issue that Yard has to handle, and I think he understands it's also at stake because there's a redheaded Mexican right now that looks to be hovering a weight class that can make you a lot of money, and you want to be a part of those sweepstakes. You you definitely want to jump into that area, and it's also you got to have a domestic situation because we know
He's
Frank
nowhere
Warren.
near ready for Canelo.
Yeah.
But
Oh
give him
no.
Canelo, he'll go in there to fight him anyway because he sees the payday.
Yeah. Exactly. Is the payday? But then you have to remember, there's also this domestic thing with the UK, particularly light heavyweight, because we know Anthony Yard. He's more aligned with one camp, and then we know on the other side is Buatse, who's aligned with the other camp.
Yeah.
And we know that's been that little burgeoning rivalry in trying to get to trying to get to the top by heavyweight. Buatsi is doing what he's supposed to do. Yard, unfortunately, in this fight and in the Kovalev fight, took steps back. So he understands you have to focus on it. If he can get around the jab, he has enough skill set to beat Arthur. He has enough range, he has enough combinations, but the problem is he has to handle the jab, like you mentioned. If he can handle the jab, then he has his fight. If he doesn't, unfortunately, it'll be another one of those cases of what could have been.
Yeah, I basically agree. Again, the key is how does he handle that jab? That's the question. That's the $1 million question heading to this fight, and what adjustments him and more importantly his trainer can make to combat that. One more fight before we begin to shut things down here. That's going to be in LA Sunday, the 5th, the return of Gervonta Tank Davis. He was supposed to fight, as most folks know, Rolly Romero, but Romero had to drop out due to issues of sex. He's been accused of sexual assault, sexual misconduct. So he decided to pull out of this fight to handle those legal matters. Tank is going to fight Isaac Cruz. Pretty tough nut, in my opinion, as a replacement. He's no bum. He's no slouch at all. I think he's actually a pretty good fighter. Something that Tank has talked about in pre-fight, in the lead up to this fight. Going to fight in L.A. Um, I say that Cruz should provide Tank a decent test, but he kind of has a style all made ready for. He has a style that will well suit Tank Daniel, and that is he's a guy who likes to come forward. Tank has always had trouble against guys who can give him movement, guys who has a good jab and can box a bit, and Cruz is a come forward fighter who likes to brawl. Um, you can't sit there and fight and brawl against a Gervonta Davis who, hell, 130, 135. It's probably the hardest puncher in that weight area. Because of that, it'll be entertaining for a while, but the accuracy, precision, and plus the power, sheer power of Tank, I think will ultimately be too much for Cruz at the end. Cruz will be there. He will take his shots, but I think over time he will start to take a beating, and I could very well see Tank stopping this guy.
Yeah, this is very true when it comes to this fight. because Isaac Cruz, we have to remember, he actually was one of the finalists before they initially decided on Rowley to have this fight in, but WA business got involved in that front and making the fight Rowley, and then the allegations made sure that Rowley got himself out of that fight. They got him out of it, and and in many ways he upgraded as far as the opponent, Isaac Cruz, because of his style, because of the way he trains, because of his resume, is provides Tank a better fight than Rolly would have. Rolly would have provided more of a maybe a little more fun on fight week, but this is probably a better fight for Tank. But like you mentioned, this his style is tailor made for Tank to score a pretty nice victory, if not a knockout. Which is what this pretty much these series of fights are meant to Tank. You have to remember, none of the fights that Tank did on pay per view really were fights that were actually meant to challenge him. There were fights that were made for him to become a star. And a lot of those pay per view numbers, particularly if you see the one against Barrios giving the opponents, it's working. It's working. People know who Tank is. People know what he can do, whether it's because of him or because of Floyd, and they want to see him fight. So this works out. You're on a rare night of boxing, Sunday afternoon, so you're not interfering with the other fight when it comes to Haney and Diaz. Now, what it'll lead to, that's going to be what's interesting, because I mentioned it on Twitter, like Gail talked about like having the unification fund in Australia. I do not believe Tank would ever, or Floyd would ever put himself in that position where he has to fight on the road. Even though the other guy has all the belts, he'll try to dictate the terms. But this should be an entertaining fight for Tank. A more entertaining fight than would probably have a Rolly. But I fully expect a knockout. It may not be a spectacular knockout, but I expect a knockout. I expect Tank to wear him out, and we just have to see where Floyd moves to next, because the a lot of the other, almost all of the other major opponents, they're not on their side of the street, and with the Cambos and the way with the Kambosos, Teofimo fight went down. There really is no excuse for not trying to make fights across promotions and across streaming services.
Exactly. I think that I agree with you that be a sustained beating for the most part. Uh, until Gervonta Davis closes the show here. It'll be interesting also that where he goes from here, because with Kambosos defeating Teofimo, um, there seems to be a kind of revitalization, if you will, at 135 pounds. Kind of the doors have kind of opened a bit, so Davis has option at 135 or even at 140, given where what Josh Taylor decides to do after his upcoming mandatory title defense. So we'll see where he goes. Should be an exciting fight. No matter how long it lasts between Davis and Cruz, we're going to start to shut the show down. On that note, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat, be it Mitch, be it Yolanda, uh, even Mayflower. Even though I was starting to disagree with a lot of your comments, I appreciate it, even if I had to push back because going a little bit too far, respectfully. Um, for those who please make sure to hit that like button. Please make sure that you follow us and click that subscribe button. Also, make sure to follow us on various podcast platforms, be it Spotify, be it Google Podcast, be it Anchor, be it Apple Podcast. And if you check out the show, please look for the black, gold, and red label, the pound for pound boxer report with the old gray, black, and red label. Those are prior episodes. They're still up. But the one with the updated black background, the gold and red, gold lettering and red design that you see here. Um, those are where you will find many of our updated episodes. Again, I want to thank everybody for their questions and their comments in the chat. I'll go to you, Daniel. I already mentioned where you can check out Gail, talk to her about boxing. You can also check her out on a semi-regular basis on TMZ Live. She appears on there quite often. I'll go to you, Daniel, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk professional wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, folks, you can find me on Twitter, Rawkuz99, RAWKUZ99. Catch me on there. Definitely trying to do a little bit of things at the end of the year. It's, it's been a long year. Hopefully 2022 doesn't provide any other surprises that we had. But you never know. You never know. Unfortunately, like I said, we don't have the Japanese cards to look forward to, but we don't know what other fights are going to be surprises.
Indeed, and for those who want to talk boxing, music, even fitness with yours truly, you know what it is on Twitter. Brother JR at Brother JR76. Um, as I said earlier in the show, if you want to check out all things Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page, the site is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.com. Again, if you want to email us any questions or emails, any comments and whatnot, you can do so, p4pboxing at p4pboxingreport.com. If you check out the sites, you'll find links to where to find us all over social media. We're on Facebook, we're on IG, we're on Twitter, we're on Tumblr. Also, you can check out the show on various podcast platforms as well as where you can donate. On the next episode, we will do a recap of Tank Davis and his fight against Isaac Cruz. We will do a recap of the rematch between Lyndon Arthur and Anthony Yarde. We will recap Haney and Jojo Diaz as well as the McCaskil fight against Burgos and preview a lot of action that's going down on December 11th. The return of Vasil Lomachenko. He's fighting Richard Comey. Big Baby Anderson, rising heavyweight prospect. He's fighting on that undercard. Alexander Zayas, who we talked about a lot, he's also on that same card as well. Keyshawn Davis, if you watch the Olympics, made a very good account for himself, won a silver medal. He's also going to fight on that card as well. That those fights will take place in NYC on ESPN. Also on the 11th on Showtime. Nonito Donaire is defending his WBC 118-pound title against Remar Gaballo. Also on the 11th, the Zone card headlined by Connor Ben, fighting Chris Algieri. On the undercard of that, Katie Taylor is defending her undisputed women's lightweight titles. Fight card in Dubai, John Riel Casimiro defending his WBO 118-pound title against Paul Butler. Sonny Edwards is defending his IBF flyweight title, the first title defense against Jason Mama. The return of Donnie Niete. Talk about the milk carton fighter, Daniel. He's back. He fought earlier this year. He's fighting again on that card. Archie Sharp, top Archie Sharp, Joan O'Carroll, top junior lightweight contenders. That's a pretty power pack card over in Dubai. And Dmitry Bivol, finally, he's fighting in Russia, making his defense of the WBA light heavyweight title against Salamov. So yeah, a lot of fights on the 11th. And we may also, depends on when we have the show next week, we may also preview Naoya anyways, who fingers crossed, is still scheduled to defend his unified WBA IBF 118-pound titles against a fighter from Thailand by the name of Depion on the undercard of that fight. Wilfredo Mendez defending his WBO strawweight title against a local fighter from Japan by the name of Taniguchi. So yeah, the next couple of weeks is really loaded. So we will try to talk about as many of those fights as we can. We may have to, Daniel, do a two-parter split those fights up, split that up because there's so many fights. So yeah, once again, I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. I want to thank Gail for joining us earlier. Again, thank you, Yolanda, Mitch, and even you, Mayflower, for Daniel from the Unscrapping for Boxing News. I'm your host, Michael. This has been episode 345 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Again, thanks for everybody for joining us. We will see you next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.